There comes a moment in every life when silence becomes louder than struggle, and waiting turns into a question of worth. Not all delay is denial, some of it is design. What you have carried in patience was never unnoticed, even when it felt unseen. The weight you bore in secret was shaping something deeper within you. Now the season shifts, not because time has passed, but because you have. What was once withheld is now prepared, and what felt distant is standing at the door. There is a kind of silence that does not belong to emptiness, but to preparation. It is the silence of unseen work, where life appears to stand still while something deeper is being assembled beneath the surface of your understanding. You may call it delay, you may even call it denial, yet neither word fully captures the quiet architecture being formed in the hidden places of your becoming. For what is truly being prepared is never announced before it is ready to be carried. It is a strange mercy that what we most desire is not always given at the moment of our asking. If it were, we might mistake immediacy for meaning and possession for readiness. There is a refinement that takes place in the unseen hours, where desire is tested not for its intensity, but for its endurance. In that testing, something subtle occurs. The soul begins to separate what it merely wants from what it is truly prepared to steward. This separation is not loud. It does not declare itself. It works like time upon stone, shaping without announcement. There are seasons when every outward sign suggests absence, yet inwardly there is a forming that words cannot trace. It is here that the hidden preparation begins, not as punishment, but as alignment. For what arrives too early can overwhelm the hands that are not yet steady enough to hold it. And so, life in its deeper wisdom withholds not to diminish you, but to strengthen the very structure within you that will one day be required to bear what you have been asking for. You begin to notice, perhaps without fully naming it, that your responses are changing. What once shattered your patience now merely bends it. What once demanded immediate resolution now finds you able to wait without collapse. This is not resignation, it is refinement. The world may call it delay, but something within you begins to recognize it as formation. And formation, unlike delay, always has intention woven into its silence. Even the weight of unanswered longing becomes part of the shaping. For longing itself is not wasted in such a process, it becomes pressure. And pressure, rightly endured, becomes strength. Seen hands of time are not idle in your waiting. They are pressing, adjusting, removing what cannot accompany you into what is being prepared. And though you may not see what is being removed, you begin to feel lighter in ways you cannot explain. It is often only in hindsight that one realizes how carefully the delay was arranged. What felt like obstruction was protection from receiving prematurely what would have broken you unprepared. The architecture of blessing is never careless. It is measured, not in urgency, but in readiness. And readiness is rarely what we assume it to be. It is not enthusiasm alone, but stability under weight, clarity under pressure, and peace in the absence of immediate answers. So you move through these unseen intervals thinking you are waiting for something to arrive, while in truth you are being made into the kind of person who will not lose themselves when it does. And this is the hidden preparation behind delayed blessings, where nothing is simply withheld, but everything is being arranged in an order deeper than sight, shaping you in ways you would not have chosen but will one day recognize as necessary, where the unseen work continues still, quietly forming, adjusting. Preparing it is in this continuation that endurance begins to reveal itself not as mere survival, but as evidence. Not evidence to the world, but evidence to the unseen order of becoming that you are not merely passing through time, but being shaped by it. What you once called struggle begins to take on a different meaning when you realize it has been recording your capacity rather than measuring your failure. Endurance is not passive waiting, it is the quiet proof that something within you refuses collapse even when nothing outside you confirms progress. There is a point in every long season where the mind begins to question whether persistence has meaning at all. Yet even that questioning becomes part of the refinement, for it exposes what your endurance is built upon. If it is built only on expectation, it weakens. But if it is built on something deeper, something like conviction without sight, it begins to stand differently, as though it has weight even in invisibility. And this weight is what signals readiness more than any visible achievement ever could. You start to notice that what once exhausted you no longer consumes you in the same way. The same circumstances may still exist, yet your response to them has changed. This is where endurance stops being an effort and starts becoming a condition of being. It becomes a quiet argument against despair, not spoken aloud, but lived consistently. And consistency, in the unseen world of formation, is louder than reaction. There is also a strange reversal that takes place. What you thought was weakening you begins to strengthen you in ways that cannot be immediately measured. Delays that once felt like resistance begin to function like resistance training, shaping resilience into something structural rather than emotional. You are not simply enduring events, you are being calibrated by them, adjusted to carry what previously would have overwhelmed you. And so endurance begins to serve as evidence, not of stagnation, but of preparation under pressure. It proves that your inner framework is expanding rather than collapsing, even when outward circumstances suggest otherwise. The absence of visible reward does not equal the absence of progress. Instead, it often marks the stage where depth is being formed rather than display. In this way, endurance becomes the language of readiness without announcement. It speaks in silence, yet it communicates something precise: that you have not abandoned the path even when the path has offered no immediate reassurance. That you have remained present where absence would have been easier. That you have continued where stopping would have made more sense to the impatient mind. And this quiet continuation, this refusal to dissolve under unfulfilled expectation, is what gradually transforms endurance into qualification. Not qualification by merit in the conventional sense, but by the inner capacity to remain intact through delay. For what is ultimately being measured is not how quickly you arrive, but how completely you are formed while waiting to arrive, where endurance ceases to be a burden and becomes instead the quiet signature of someone who is being prepared without needing to see the preparation itself. What follows endurance is not arrival, but transformation so subtle that at first it does not announce itself as change at all. It arrives quietly, like dawn that does not ask permission from the night it displaces. You may still think you are the same person moving through familiar waiting, yet something within you has already begun to shift its structure. The transformation that precedes receipt is never loud, because anything loud would betray its incompleteness. It is the reshaping of the vessel before anything new is placed within it. There is a strange mercy in this unseen alteration. If what you were asking for came to you while you still carried the same internal weight, the same unrefined responses, the same fragile reactions to pressure, then the very thing you desired might become too heavy for the framework of your present self. So transformation begins not after arrival, but before it, as though life itself refuses to hand over substance to a form that cannot yet sustain it. You begin to notice that your inner reactions are no longer as immediate as they once were. Where impulse used to rule, there is now a brief silence before response. In that silence, something new is forming, a kind of interior spacing where understanding begins to take precedence over reaction. This is not suppression, but expansion. The self is no longer rushing to fill every moment with certainty. It is learning to hold uncertainty without breaking under its weight. It is often in this stage that confusion becomes a companion, not the destructive kind, but the unsettling awareness that you are no longer who you were, yet not fully who you are becoming. The old patterns still echo, but they no longer govern in the same way. They feel distant, as though belonging to a version of you that has begun to lose authority over the present moment. This in-between condition is not stagnation, it is recalibration. There are changes that cannot be explained through effort alone. You did not consciously decide to become more patient, yet impatience loses its grip. You did not deliberately choose to see differently, yet perception itself begins to widen. This suggests that transformation is not merely self-improvement, it is something being done to you as much as something being done by you. The self is being restructured in ways that thought alone cannot fully trace. And so what once provoked urgency now meets a quieter interior space. What once demanded immediate resolution is now allowed to exist without collapse. This does not mean indifference has entered, but rather that proportion has changed. The inner world is no longer dominated by the immediate weight of every external signal. Instead, there is a growing ability to distinguish between what is momentary and what is forming beneath the surface of moments. This transformation is not cosmetic, it is architectural. It alters the foundation rather than the decoration. And because of this, it often goes unnoticed by those looking from the outside, even while it is completely reshaping what lies within. The person who emerges from this stage is not simply improved, but restructured in a way that changes what they can now carry without distortion. It is here that readiness begins to take shape without declaration. Not as confidence alone, but as internal alignment between what is desired and what can now be sustained. The self becomes less fragmented, less divided between longing and capacity, as though the distance between intention and stability has begun to shorten without announcement, where transformation continues quietly beneath the surface of expectation, preparing something that has not yet been named to finally be received. What you once called waste begins to reveal itself as structure when seen from the vantage point of what it has made possible within you. The question of why waiting was never wasted is not answered by explanation alone, but by recognition of what has quietly accumulated in the spaces you thought were empty. For emptiness, in truth, is rarely absence, it is often the hidden density of formation that has not yet taken visible shape. There are seasons in which nothing appears to move, and yet everything essential is being rearranged beneath perception. What feels like delay is often the removal of illusions that once made quick arrival seem desirable. You are slowly being freed from the urgency that would have led you to accept what could not have sustained you. In that freedom, though it is not always felt as such, something essential is being preserved within you. It is easy to mistake lack of progress for lack of purpose, yet purpose does not always announce itself in measurable increments. Sometimes it is working in reverse of expectation, undoing what cannot remain, even if that undoing feels like loss. And what is removed in such seasons is not always visible to the mind that is still attached to outcome. But in time, you begin to see that what left was not absence, but protection disguised as interruption. There is also a refinement of perception that occurs in waiting. You begin to see more clearly what once captivated you too quickly. Desires that once appeared absolute begin to reveal their limitations when exposed to the quiet discipline of time. In this way, waiting becomes a kind of correction, not of desire itself, but of its direction. What you thought you wanted is gradually tested against what you can truly carry without losing yourself in the process. And so the passage of time, rather than diminishing you, begins to filter you. It separates impulse from intention, reaction from conviction, appearance from substance. This filtration is not always comfortable, because it removes the luxury of illusion. But what remains after such removal is often more stable, more aligned, more capable of enduring what earlier versions of yourself would have collapsed under. Even the repetition of delay, which once felt meaningless, begins to show structure when seen as a form of deep preparation. It is not circular motion without progress, but spiral movement toward depth. Each return to waiting is not a return to the same place, but a descent into a more refined version of readiness. The surface may appear unchanged, but the interior is no longer what it was. In this way, what seemed like nothing happening becomes revealed as the slow accumulation of capacity. Seen work of patience, restraint, and quiet continuation forms a kind of foundation that cannot be rushed without fracture. And so waiting, rather than being a gap in meaning, becomes the very medium through which meaning is stabilized within you. It becomes clear, though only gradually, that nothing essential was ever truly idle. Even the pauses carried instruction, even the silence carried shaping. And what you thought was withheld was, in its deeper logic, being arranged in a way that would not collapse under premature arrival, where every moment that seemed empty was in fact contributing to the structure that now stands beneath what is finally ready to be. Received, what begins to emerge from all this unseen shaping is a quiet understanding that character is never separate from reward, but always its foundation. What you receive is never detached from what you have become capable of holding. The alignment between character and reward is not a moral slogan, but a structural truth of becoming, where the form of the vessel determines the stability of what it contains. There is a deep consistency in life that is often mistaken for delay or injustice. Yet it is not inconsistency at work, but calibration. What arrives is always in proportion to what can be sustained without internal fracture. This is why two people may desire the same outcome, yet only one is able to carry it without distortion. The difference is not always effort, but internal architecture. Character is formed in the quiet places where no recognition is given. It is built in the choices that do not appear significant at the time, but accumulate weight in unseen ways. Each moment of restraint, each refusal to abandon what matters simply because it is difficult, becomes part of a deeper alignment that no external observer can fully measure. And yet it is precisely this invisible alignment that determines what can safely enter your life without undoing you. There is also a sobering truth embedded within this alignment. Not everything desired is compatible with every version of the self. Some outcomes require a level of internal coherence that cannot be bypassed through urgency. They demand a steadiness that is not emotional but structural, a consistency that remains intact even when circumstances are unstable. Without this, what is received becomes unstable within you rather than life-giving. And so life, in its quiet intelligence, does not only prepare what you will receive, but also prepares what will receive it. The external and the internal are shaped in parallel, though not always at the same visible speed. What feels like postponement is often this synchronization taking place, where inner stability is being brought into proportion with outer possibility. In this alignment, even disappointment takes on a different role. It is no longer merely rejection of desire, but refinement of direction. It removes what cannot coexist with your deeper formation, even when the mind resists letting it go. And what remains after such refinement is not smaller life, but more stable life, though it often arrives through the narrowing of options that once felt essential. There comes a point where the desire for immediate reward begins to soften, not from defeat, but from understanding. You begin to see that what is meant for you does not require force, but fit. And fit is never rushed, it is revealed through alignment over time. In this realization, the urgency that once drove impatience begins to lose authority. What replaces it is a quieter confidence, not in timing, but in structure, a sense that nothing essential is being lost, only arranged, and that what cannot yet be held is not withheld in absence of care, but in recognition of capacity still in formation. This is where character and reward begin to meet without contradiction, where what you become and what you receive are no longer separate stories, but one continuous unfolding toward a moment that has been quietly preparing both sides of the same encounter. There is a point in every unfold in life where waiting is no longer experienced as absence, but as convergence. What once felt like separate threads of desire in one hand, delay in the other, begin to move toward a single meeting place. This is the moment where preparation and provision are no longer distant concepts, but two movements of the same design finally drawing into alignment. You begin to realize that nothing was ever truly random in its timing. Even the moments that felt misaligned were quietly adjusting the shape of what was to come. For what is given too early does not arrive as gift, but as burden, and what is given too late loses the warmth of its intended season. And so there is a hidden precision working beneath the surface of events, where timing is not accidental but carefully weighted against what you are becoming capable of holding. Preparation is rarely experienced as something complete while it is happening. It feels unfinished because it is meant to. If you could fully see its purpose while inside it, you would mistake the process for arrival. Yet what is being formed in you is not merely readiness in theory, but stability in reality. The kind of stability that does not depend on circumstance, but remains intact within it. And then there comes a subtle shift. You start to notice that the things you once strained toward no longer require the same strain. Not because they have disappeared, but because something within you has expanded to meet them without collapse. This expansion is not dramatic, it is quiet, almost imperceptible. Yet it changes everything about how you stand in relation to what you once pursued. Provision, when it finally approaches, does not arrive as interruption, but as recognition. It recognizes something in you that has already been shaped in silence. It meets a version of you that was not present when the longing first began. This is why the moment feels less like sudden arrival and more like inevitable completion of something long in motion. There is also a deep restraint in how life delivers what has been prepared. It does not overwhelm the vessel it has refined. It meets it in proportion, as though confirming that the inner and outer structures have finally become compatible. In this compatibility, there is no shock of excess, only the quiet acknowledgement that what was once too heavy has now found its rightful weight within you. And so the distance between preparation and provision dissolves, not because time has collapsed, but because alignment has matured. What was once separate phases now reveals itself as one continuous movement toward fit. The waiting does not disappear, it is understood differently, as part of the same architecture that ensured nothing would arrive without first becoming sustainable within you. At this stage, the question is no longer whether what you sought will come, but whether you have fully recognized what has already been made ready inside you to receive it without distortion, where preparation and provision stand no longer as opposites, but as the same unfolding reality finally meeting itself at the exact point where readiness becomes arrival. And so, at last, there is a moment that does not feel like arrival in the dramatic sense, but like recognition, quiet, settled, almost inevitable. What is received does not break into your life as something foreign, but settles into it as though it had always been waiting for the right version of you to exist. This is not the suddenness of luck, but the completion of alignment long prepared in silence. You see now that nothing essential was ever truly withheld in cruelty or indifference. What was delayed was being shaped into something that would not fracture under your unpreparedness. And you too were being shaped not to chase endlessly, but to stand in a way that could finally sustain what once felt distant. The waiting was not empty space, it was the slow construction of stability within you that could meet what you once only imagined. There is a strange humility in receiving what you once begged for in uncertainty. Not because it has changed in essence, but because you have. The same gift now meets a different interior world, one that no longer collapses under intensity, but can hold it without losing its center. And in that holding, something deeper is revealed. That the value of what is received is not only in its arrival, but in the transformation that made arrival possible. It becomes clear that nothing truly meaningful can enter a life that has not first been made capable of sustaining its meaning. And so what once felt like postponement reveals itself as protection from distortion. For if you had received it earlier, you might not have recognized it, or worse, you might have misunderstood it through the lens of an unformed self. Now there is no need for urgency, because urgency belonged to a version of you that believed absence meant rejection. But what stands here now refutes that illusion without noise. It simply exists, and in its existence, it confirms that timing was never your enemy. It was the unseen intelligence ensuring that encounter and readiness would not collide, but coincide, and so receiving becomes less about acquisition and more about acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that what has arrived was always moving toward you in a way you could not yet perceive. Acknowledgement that you were also moving toward it, even when it felt as though you were standing still. Both movements were real, both necessary, both converging without your awareness. There is a final quiet realization that remains when everything settles. What you call now is not a sudden gift, but the point at which preparation finally meets what it was preparing for, where nothing is excessive, nothing is missing, and nothing arrives out of place, because both the giver and the receiver have been formed in the same unseen continuity that now resolves itself not as surprise, but as completion unfolding exactly as it was always meant to stand.